Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Welcome back to The Deal. I'm your host, Jason Kelly, alongside my partner, Alex Rodriguez. All right, Alex, a lot of baseball talk today. Coming up on the show, we're going to have Sam Kennedy, the CEO of Fenway Sports Group, talking about the Red Sox. You're in Atlanta, my hometown, where you've just completed covering the All-Star Game. I'm actually, in a strange way, in your OG baseball town, Seattle, where you started your career. It's wild to think back to those days. I'm sorry to have missed you in Atlanta, but I had to be out here for Bloomberg Green, and we'll talk about that in a second. But how was it? Like, what was the vibe there at the Battery? I wish the Braves were better, but it sounds like they at least put on a good party.
Yeah, a great party. And you're right. I think that's the point. I wish the Braves had one of their magical seasons that they usually have to be able to celebrate the first half. What I found here is what Atlanta, Georgia is an incredible place. I really love it. The people are wonderful, huge sports fans. That complex, another John Malone production, because Atlanta Braves are a public company under John Malone's umbrella, just like F1. They've done an incredible job. I mean, I had the great room in the 7th floor overlooking right center field. It was the best hotel room I've ever stayed in. And then there's great restaurants, great vibe. And then we did the pregame show for Fox, pre and post, out in the pavilion where you have what is called the Battery. And it felt like it was Alabama, LSU. The people were going crazy. But most importantly, the people, the league, everyone was very hospitable here.
Yeah, it is amazing what they've done. And I think we've talked about this on the show before. You know, I've been a Braves fan forever. I grew up there. My parents are both from Atlanta, and you know them. And, there was a lot of consternation when the Braves left downtown. They were going out to Cobb County. No one really knew how it was going to go. What I love about this for you is it's like two of the things you love the most, baseball and real estate, like colliding in the most perfect way. So I have to imagine, knowing how you think, that like you've got baseball on one side of your brain, but then the rest of the time you're like, oh, wow, okay, they put that retail there and they did the residential in this place and the hospitality here and the hotel and all that. So it must have been a feast for the senses for you.
Jason, I have 2 pages of notes, maybe 3, but I mean full notes on all the things that I found that they did right and unique that I hadn't seen before. The one other shout out I want to give out, Jason, is I thought MLB did a fantastic job in honoring one of my heroes, the great Hank Aaron. And they did a great ceremony. The legacy of the Atlanta Braves is awesome, and it's cemented by someone like Hank Aaron, who endured so much for people like myself and others. And not only was he a great player, but he was just a great example for everyone who loves baseball.
I have to say, I love the recreation of the record-setting home run. I thought that was just incredible. And listen, I think as any sort of sports fan, there are certain moments, if you had to name sort of the 5 most important moments that you could like rewatch and rewatch and rewatch, Hank Aaron hitting that home run is one of them. It's like Miracle on Ice. It's these things that, are absolutely indelible in the culture. And to your point, sort of remind us how much sports can really influence the broader conversation, the broader world. Yeah, I am very jealous that you were there. I was here in Seattle, actually interviewing another owner in the sports world, Samantha Holloway, obviously the owner of the Kraken, daughter of the late David Bonderman, who I knew through my private equity days. What she has done in Seattle with the Kraken and Climate Pledge Arena. I don't know if you've ever been to Climate Pledge. It is incredible. This town has changed a lot since you started your career here, those many years ago. But it's a great sports town.
And they're hungry, they love all their sports. I remember they used to love the Sonics. I remember sometimes sitting with Paul Allen, one of the co-founders of Microsoft, with Bill Gates. He would sit right behind the court, right there, right behind the hoop. And they sold out, I think, like 15 years in a row. So they miss their basketball. They love their football. They're incredible baseball fans. And what people forget, Jason, is you don't own that market. You own, like, the whole Northwest is yours, including Vancouver and parts of Canada. We had tons of fans that would come from Canada all the time, especially in the summertime. But you're right. It's a vibrant city. They love their sports. And because they're so far in the Northwest, I think there's a little chip on their shoulder, maybe a big chip, that makes them some of the best fans in the world.
Yeah, no, they are serious fans for sure. And Sam was quick to point out that, basketball is still very much here in the form of the Seattle Storm, the WNBA franchise. They play their games, all their home games there at Climate Pledge Arena, which is a really cool venue. And Sue Bird has been a guest on this show. We know the power of the W here. In fact, interestingly enough, someone told me while I was here that Seattle was the first, and this just happened recently with the PWHL, the Professional Women's Hockey League, announcing they were going to have a team here. It's the first city to have all three major women's professional sports franchises, so hockey, basketball, and soccer.
Wow.
And a lot going on here. As you know, again, you were a young person here. It's a young person's town. It's a tech-driven town. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of innovation. People love to get outdoors, especially this time of year. I'm such a rube sometimes. It's like I sort of forgot where it was in latitude. It's light until like 10:30 at night this time of year. It's crazy. It must have been wild to play baseball here during those times.
It was so wild. You know what else was wild, Jason, is I always think, I started my first year as an 18-year-old. I was in 1994. And if I just took every dollar I ever made in Seattle and invested it in Seattle-based companies, Boeing, Starbucks, Microsoft, Amazon, my goodness. I mean, they're on fire, and they have been over the last 20 years.
Yeah, it's been really cool. I've been spending time with colleagues out here. We obviously have a Bloomberg bureau here in Seattle with some unbelievable reporters and editors, and just the storytelling that they're able to do for all the reasons you're talking about. These big companies that are here, but the sports are really off the chain. So excited to get to know them a little bit more. And in fact, next week the NHL is having their annual business meetings here, in part because of what Sam Holloway and the Kraken have done. All right, so back to baseball. Coming up on the show, Sam Kennedy, a guy you've known for a while. I've gotten to know him a little bit. I love the Yankees-Red Sox talk that we had with him. Your admiration for Fenway Sports Group as an ownership conglomerate and a sports conglomerate in so many ways really comes through. So excited for everyone to hear that. Coming up on the show, Sam Kennedy. Welcome back to The Deal. I'm Jason Kelly alongside Alex Rodriguez. And today, our very special guest, Sam Kennedy, the president and CEO of the Boston Red Sox. Yep, the president and CEO of the Boston Red Sox on a podcast co-hosted with one of the greatest Yankees of all time. So I'm going to start right there, Sam. How in the world are you guys such good friends? Alex, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll give it a try. Well, I did my part. I wore pinstripes, Jason. I thought Sam would be wearing red. But, he's beat us enough over the years, so he didn't want to rub it in. Sam is just one of the most respected people in sports. In every conversation as a top CEO, not only in sports, but what they're building Fenway is truly phenomenal. And he's become a North Star and a role model for a lot of organizations, including ours with Mark Laurie and I, what we're trying to do with the Timberwolves and the Lynx. But my rule was always I'm a little bit of an old schooler, and I never wanted to be close with anybody in the Red Sox unless they were grandfathered in, like Big Papi and Pedro and Manny. These guys were Dominicans. So I'm like, all right, that's different. But I kept hearing about Sam. What a great guy. And you don't want to like any Red Sox, but I couldn't help it. Once I met Sam, I quickly liked him. And then when I started doing Sunday Night Baseball, he was so kind. He was invite me into his box, and I would say hello to John Henry and Tom Warner. And, the rest is history. Now we have a great common friend in Ed Hurley, who works for Wachtell, who's a great attorney and a great mentor of both of ours. And yeah, that's our little Sam A-Rod story.
Well, it is true. We've got a great relationship, and it goes back a long way. For me, I actually started my career as an intern for the New York Yankees in the early 1990s. I had a lot of friendships in the front office there. Brian Cashman and I started just about the same time. And so obviously on the field, we've been battling for decades, but off the field, there's a great respect and relationship. And what I've always enjoyed talking business with Alex, and most impressed. I don't even know if he knows this, but when he started to explain how the multifamily apartment business worked to me about 15, 20 years ago, the first time we met, I was like, wow, this guy is doing so much off the field. And then after his playing days, we got to know each other through business and have always enjoyed the sports business and the sports investing space, which is changing so rapidly. And it's just such an exciting time for our business, as you guys know.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. I mean, take us back to '02, because that's when you joined the Red Sox. You come from the Padres, obviously a storied franchise, but yet things aren't going great at that point for the Red Sox. There's a long drought that you guys are facing at that point. What did you see as the business opportunity in taking that job?
Well, the most important thing was winning baseball games. And, we came in 2002, our first press conference. I'll never forget John Henry, Tom Werner, Larry Lucchino, the late, great Larry Lucchino. He liked to mix it up with everybody in the media and at other clubs. But we announced that we were going to win the World Series. And in fact, we were going to win multiple World Series, and starting to change the mindset early days about what we could accomplish on the field was really important. Honoring traditions in Boston, trying to preserve, protect, restore Fenway Park was really important. And the third thing was being very active in the community. And those are just words, as you know. Stewards of franchises and clubs come in and they say a lot of things, but hopefully we've honored those words with our actions. But the first order of business, Jason, was to win baseball games, to get a World Series championship. At that time, it had been 84 years. We finally got over the hump in 2004, and that really did propel us. It gave John and Tom and myself, in terms of the business of sports, the confidence to say, wow, if we can do this, get the right people in the right place with Theo Epstein as our GM and Tito Francona as our manager, perhaps these skills could be replicable in other environments. And so it was John who came to me in 2005 and said, listen, we've done a great job. What else can we do? And that actually led us to NASCAR. So that was our first investment into Roush Fenway Racing in about 2006 time period. And then we've just sort of built from there with that entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about your talent because, 2002, the firepower you guys had. I mean, if you think about John Henry, Tom Werner, Larry Lucchino, yourself, Theo Epstein, and then you go on the field and you have Schilling and Pedro and Manny and Big Papi. What was the secret sauce that worked so well? Because you go almost 100 years without winning, and then you last 20 years, you've won 4 titles.
It's a mindset. I think there's a very, very healthy mindset around being paranoid that we're not good enough and being paranoid that we're not pushing hard enough to make sure that the right people are in the right positions. We've made every mistake in the book that every sports team, front office, and ownership group has made with the Red Sox, with Roush Fenway, with Liverpool. We're now in the PGA Tour. We're the Pittsburgh Penguins. We've made lots of mistakes because, this just in the sports business and sporting success on the field, on pitch, on the ice is really, really hard. It's such a competitive landscape. But we have a real healthy paranoia that, someone's going to take this away from us. We're not uncovering every rock to find the best and brightest people, the most talented general managers, team presidents, people in every position across the organization. It's such a cliche, but at Fenway Sports Group, it starts and ends with the people. There is a really fun, collaborative environment where John Henry and Tom Werner and Mike Gordon set the tone of there's really no bad ideas. You want to throw out an idea to buy Liverpool Football Club when it's headed to bankruptcy in 2010. That idea came from someone in our corporate sponsorship group. They read about it in the Sports Business Journal. They loved Liverpool Football Club. And they sent us a note saying, save our club. And that's how the conversation started. So there's this culture that no matter where you sit within the organization, you can bring a transformational idea to Fenway Sports Group. So being a part of that is really, really special and something that I cherish, being a part of this Fenway family.
All right, I want to get to Liverpool in a second. But before we get to that, I just want to do one more beat on the Red Sox because this has been a very interesting season, to say the least. You've been out and about talking quite a bit about one very specific deal that you guys did with the Giants. Talk to us about making big decisions in the current environment and having the history of, making bold decisions and then essentially having to answer for them.
Well, I'll never forget when Theo Epstein was named general manager. The two of us grew up here in Boston together, ironically. We worked for the Padres together. We came back here. When his dad gave him advice back in 2002, when he took over as general manager, it was just 2 words: be bold. And those 2 words have, I think, stuck with us, stuck with John, with Tom, with everybody in the organization. And so bold decision-making doesn't mean you're reckless, but bold decision-making means sometimes you need to do things that are not going to be perceived as popular. I can tell you lots of things that we've done from a business perspective that have not been popular, lots of things from a baseball perspective. The decision to trade Rafael Devers in the month of June, on the day that we swept the New York Yankees to get back into this thing, it was timing that we could not control, but a decision rooted in what we felt was best for the organization in the near term and in the long term, because we couldn't find alignment. Just to be direct, we've had an amazing relationship with Rafi. He grew up in this organization, probably a lot of mistakes that we made along the way, but ultimately we made the decision to move on. And that was really, really hard. I can tell you my 22-year-old son was not happy with me. My 84-year-old father was not happy with me, with John, with Brez, with Tom, with everybody in the decision-making apparatus. But you've got to be willing to make these hard decisions. They are unpopular at times, and we recognize that. But it was a decision that we felt was in our best interest. I'm really proud of the group because we've had to come together, and you take that bat out of the middle of the lineup. Nobody knows is better than Alex. It's hard to see how that one individual move is going to make you better in the moment. But this was a deal that was bigger than that. Now we've got a few players back in return. It does give us some flexibility here as we go into the deadline. But that was a really hard one. And it's an obligation of those of us in leadership that you got to make really hard calls. And I tell you, they're painful when you walk into Dunkin' Donuts in the morning and people know your name and they're not happy with you. You hear about it. Alex knows that one a lot better than I do.
Sam, I want to take Theo Epstein's dad, those 2 words, be bold, and talk a little bit about Fenway, because I think what you guys have done in Fenway, going back to 2002, it's been extraordinary. And I know Larry Lucchino and a lot of your team members over there had a lot to do with it. But from a playing perspective, from watching, you can make an argument that this is the greatest American sports venue to watch a ball game in. Where it sits in the neighborhood, those are the best seats in the house. How do you keep the integrity of such a great monument, but yet make it more modern and even a more fun place to be?
Well, having grown up here, we knew what Fenway meant. I mean, really, you have 2 institutions, right? You have the institution of the Boston Red Sox and you have the institution of Fenway Park. And when we came in 2002, we needed to study the structure to make sure that it could, with proper investment, withstand another 30, 40, 50 years. We got comfortable with that in about late 2004. And then we started to invest year in and year out. To date, we've put nearly $400 million, all private money, into Fenway Park to preserve it, protect it, enhance it. But you said it, Alex, where it sits in the city, it's walkable, it's accessible via public transportation. It's even accessible relatively easily by car. So when you have a jewel in American sports, you don't tear it down. You try and preserve it and protect it. It is, a place night in and night out, whether we're having baseball games or concerts or English football matches or big time bowl games, where people want to come and they want to gather. We've now, over the last decade, started to expand its footprint. We built a 5,500 person music venue off of the back. We are now permitted for 2.2 million feet of retail, residential, hotel right here in the neighborhood. We move forward with the music venue, but we've been slowed down by post-COVID construction prices and interest rates. Hopefully the tide will turn there, but we really are starting to map out what the future neighborhood looks like. And we're blessed to have Fenway Park as our home. It's really, really special. And as we think about our investments in sports, that's sort of really critical. Part and parcel to everything you do is looking at where the team plays or where they may play as you think about moving forward with a sports franchise acquisition. Really, really important.
Let's talk about Fenway as a sports group and the decision to expand it. And, you mentioned John Henry saying, all right, what do we do next? How do we do more? Let's talk about Liverpool, because that is not an obvious deal to do. We live at a time now where, Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney are buying Wrexham, and it's this huge success. But there were a lot of people who looked at English football and European football back in the day, back when you were looking at it, and said, hard pass. Like, there's no way we're going to do this. You were intimately involved in that. What do you recall from sort of those key decisions to get that deal done?
Well, our purpose at Fenway Sports Group is to elevate brands and clubs and institutions that really matter. Liverpool Football Club matters to its global supporter base as much as any club. And so we thought our experience in Boston, with really a public trust, not a sports franchise or even a club, it's a public trust. And what do I mean by that? We have an obligation to doing everything in our power to win games at Fenway Park and to win matches at Anfield. After we got that famous Save My Club email, we started to study Liverpool. We started to study the English Premier League, and things just started to click and really made sense. And I'll never forget one of the first meetings we had with the investment bankers for the deal. And they were describing what needed to be done at Anfield, because Anfield needed a lot of investment and improvement. And they actually raised the idea of a new stadium. And I pulled the guy aside and I said, listen, don't ever bring that up ever again. We've just spent a decade preserving and protecting the Mona Lisa of baseball parks in Fenway. If we're going to go into Liverpool, the hallowed grounds of Anfield, we're going to want to preserve and protect it. So we made that very clear. And then it was literally like a light bulb went off with John Henry as he started to get into it. And I remember him saying, well, if we're going to do this, like, we're going to have to be prepared to beat Manchester United. Like, those are the Yankees. Like, those are the Yankees. We have to get over the hump and beat the best of the best. And so for John, it's always been about winning. Little known fact, Alex knows this. He started his career. He was an LP with the Yankees. Mm-hmm. He was an LP with George Steinbrenner in the New York Yankees in the early 1990s. And so while they have very different personalities, from what I remember about Mr. Steinbrenner, the fierce competitor and the desire to win is always there. And thankfully, with unbelievable leadership from Mike Gordon, who's the owner who's here, who spends the most time on it, Billy Hogan, our CEO, Michael Edwards, and the group over there on the football side. We've been really, really good on the pitch. We won the league title this year, and it's just been a privilege to be associated with Liverpool. But that's what we saw. We saw this club that needed investment, and it needed really professional management to come in and help it achieve what it had achieved decades prior, and sort of restoring the club back to greatness.
Sam, I really admire John Henry and Tom Warner, and I think they're both brilliant, but they're both very different. You as the CEO, kind of describe the cadence. How often do you talk to them? How are they different? What are their collective superpowers? And how do they kind of check each other? Because it is a bit of a gold standard, the way the three of you kind of work together.
Well, I have a fancy title as CEO of Fenway Sports Group and CEO of the Boston Red Sox. But really, the CEO of the enterprise, is this collective superpower, as you say, John Henry, Tom Warner. I would add Mike Gordon to that list. The three of them manage the partnership. And, 2021, Jerry Cardinal from Redbird came in and has been an awesome partner as an institutional investor, bringing a different lens. All four of those guys who I work for are very different personalities. But I would say if I had to boil it down, going back to John and Tom, who started this thing back in 2002, they have this incredible humility about them. It's always about the team, the club, the employees, the players, they really just have their priorities in order. And in terms of their personal lives, their families, they just really, really are model citizens in their lives. And so hopefully, as CEO of the organization, we build teams of people that share those common values. At the end of the day, John Henry is our principal owner, largest shareholder. He is one of the most fascinating people you'll ever meet. He's very introverted, quiet, but when you sit down and you talk to him, he's a business and sporting savant. He's been in so many different businesses and had success at the highest level wherever he's been. And, I kind of laugh when he takes a lot of grief in the media, either Liverpool or in Boston or Pittsburgh, when the teams aren't performing well. Because when you work with them every day, to your question about cadence, we talk every single day, 365 days a year.
Wow.
24/7. And most of that, honestly, is rooted in the passion for what we're doing. And I'll tell you, we focus a lot on what's going wrong. We don't focus on celebrating the success.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should a little bit more. So we're constantly pushing towards where can we be better and what's next.
So, Sam, I'd like to echo a little bit of what you said and just share a quick story about my experience with John Henry and why I ended up liking him and respecting him so much, to the point that 99% of the people out there would never know this part of John Henry that I got to know. And of course, but when Commissioner Bud Selig gave us permission to talk to you guys, it was John Henry who took the lead in recruiting me. I went to Boca and I spent 3 hours with him. And the next week he drove down to South Florida and spent 3 hours with Cynthia and I. And Cynthia was over the moon. She said, I want to be a Red Sox because of John Henry. But what stood out was his humility. His passion for baseball was second to none. That was quite surprising, how much he knew about the history of the game. And really, I knew that the Red Sox had big things coming because the way he articulated his vision and his passion to winning and to bringing championships to the fans of the Red Sox was infectious. And from that day on, I've always been a huge John Henry fan.
Well, it's an amazing recollection and just spot on. He's always putting what's best for the organization first, which does lead you, Jason, back to your question. Like at the end of the day, he signs off on all the big decisions. Like as principal owner, the buck stops with him. Our job in management is to make certain decisions that we have the authority to make, but the really big ones, acquiring a football club or trading Rafael Devers, obviously we need ownership approval. And so he is involved in every aspect of the business. He is really funny, dry wit, sarcastic. We do like to laugh at ourselves, and a word I can't say on the air, but we always say we're going to write a book called You Can't Make This Stuff Up. Because as you know, the stuff that happens every single day in sports is it's crazy. Just an anecdote the other day, right before we had an off day in Washington, I was with my family right before the 4th of July holiday. I'm like, all right, it's going to be a chill day. I get a text from our head of PR at the Red Sox. Did you know this? And it's social media of our players strolling through the Oval Office in the White House with President Trump. And I'm like, first of all, it's awesome that they got that experience. They're there. But there was a family day with the club. They had the choice of going to the White House with their families or going to the zoo, or a couple of guys play golf, whatever. But they ended up, so in sports, it's like just when you think you're going to have a quiet couple of hours, the media is going crazy. The Red Sox are in the White House. What's going on? So it's just day in and day out. You don't know what's going to happen, which is part of the beauty of it.
Well, and to that point, Sam, that's only magnified when you have different clubs across different sports, across different geographies. And it's interesting to think about, this conversation in the context of other members of what we will affectionately call the Deal Cinematic Universe. We've had Josh Harris on the show and David Blitzer, both of whom you know well. We've had Ted Leonsis, obviously, who you know well as well. There are different models for this multi-club ownership. And I do wonder, from your perspective, the opportunities are clear in terms of rising valuations and a lot that you can learn. But how do you cope with sort of the challenges of a different market, of being able to sort of give the time and attention to the clubs when they need it most, knowing that you can never get it totally right? Because if you're seen as paying too much attention to the Red Sox and not Liverpool or the Penguins or Nesson, somebody's going to be mad. So how do you balance all that?
Well, number one, you do it with the best people in the sports industry. And that's the best part of our industry is we are able to attract the brightest minds, the best people who want to be in this industry. But I'll tell you, and Alex will agree with this, nothing replaces winning. I mean, winning on the pitch, winning on the ice, winning on the field. We never get complaints in Boston about Liverpool Football Club or the Pittsburgh Penguins or the PGA Tour if we're winning 95 games and we're, winning the American League East and playing in the postseason. And so that really has to be our focus, is investing the resources into the right player personnel and winning games. And everything fuels or runs off of that. But it is hard. It's a lot of time on an airplane, and we do sort of divide up our time and attention and energy. I mean, from the management group within the ownership, those three guys, John, Tom, and Mike, no one has spent more time on Liverpool Football Club than Mike Gordon. I mean, this guy has just lived the last 15 years of being the Fenway Sports Group owner, sort of in charge of the day-to-day over there, bringing in Jurgen Klopp, putting in Billy Hogan as our CEO. And Tom spends a ton of his time on English Premier League matters, but also on Nesson because of his media background. And John and I have probably taken the lead, I would say, on our golf investment the last year and a half. So we find time. We have incredibly supportive families that are all in. And look, I'll tell you, John and Linda Henry's an investor and very involved in all aspects of Fenway Sports Group. John and Linda have this amazing relationship. It is like a family. I mean, last night was my birthday at Fenway. I had my parents and my kids and friends, and you never think twice. It's like, it is a family environment. I hope we never lose that.
Sam, I know how much you value relationships and what a great reputation you've built over the last, many decades. You also value mentorship. Can you mention maybe a few mentors and what lessons have you learned to help shape your career so far?
Well, I've been really, really fortunate, Alex. I appreciate you raising that. Obviously, beyond family members, really close, very, very blessed, incredible mom and dad, and the people that I've worked for here at Fenway Sports Group, we've already mentioned them. But one in particular who stands out is a woman named Ann Finucane, who ran Bank of America for a long time and came in 2002, and I met her. So she's been 24 years a mentor. And I said, Ann, give me some advice, for coming into Boston, but leadership in general. And she gave me the absolute best advice. It was, listen, there are two types of people in the world. There are people that give you positive energy, and there are people that suck the life out of you. Stick with the energy givers and the energy providers. And that's probably the best leadership and management advice that I've ever gotten, because people that suck the energy out of you they have to go and they can't be a part of an organization. You really need to be a positive force. So Ann has been incredible. A guy named Mark Flaherty, who is the vice chairman of Wellington here in Boston, good friends of another mentor, Ed Herlihy, has been terrific. I think of Todd and Tim Lewicki, who just have done amazing things in sports. Commissioner Manfred has been incredible to me. Theo Epstein, we're the same age, but I consider him a mentor. So I've had this just incredible group that I've been fortunate enough to be around, probably like you, Alex, different version of a clubhouse, but just being around these people who have done amazing things in business and so lucky to be exposed to different people in the sports industry. It's just been great.
All right, we're going to move on in a second to our lightning round. But before we do, I did want to ask you mentioned it in passing a little bit about golf. It is a fascinating time for the game of golf. I had a chance a year or so ago to sit on a Bloomberg stage and interview Mark Adonasio and Tom Werner about SSG, the strategic sports group that you're obviously a part of. Talk to us a little bit about how that came together and what you see happening next at this critical moment for golf.
Well, it's been a rather remarkable deal and investment and a partnership with hundreds of players. It's a very unique structure, one that we're really proud of. And it started in the summer of 2023. We had an amazing relationship with Ed Herlihy, who was the chair of the board of the PGA Tour. I mentioned Mark Flaherty, Mary Meeker, Randall Stevenson. There was a group of people on the PGA Tour policy board. And of course, Jay Monahan, who is a personal friend from Boston. He actually worked here at Fenway, became PGA Tour commissioner. And we watched what had happened around the framework agreement, and it just didn't add up to us. It didn't make any sense. And what we realized was that this was being reported as a merger or a takeover of the PGA Tour by the Public Investment Fund. But in fact, that's not what it was. It was a very smart deal that the tour had done and the Public Investment Fund had done to drop the lawsuits against each other and endeavor to work towards a partnership. And so we thought at the time, maybe we were crazy, but we thought that if we got involved with a consortium of US-based sports investors led by John Henry and the Fenway Sports Group, we could make progress and help out the PGA Tour. And what do I mean by that? Well, if we come in shoulder to shoulder, provide capital, stand up a business, create equity for the players, which we did, and offer advice, suggestions, counsel on sponsorship, broadcast, event management, we might be able to help the management team and help the players as we go forward. So we stood up a business called PGA Tour Enterprises. It was close to a $13 billion valuation at the time. We invested $1.5 billion from Fenway Sports Group, from Steve and Andy Cohen, the owners of the New York Mets, Arthur Blank, owner of the Atlanta Falcons, Wick Grossbeck, Mark Lasry, the list goes on and on. Really blue chip sports team owners that have a passion for golf, that want to be long-term partners with the players. We thought that that might be a great path forward. We were very fortunate to be selected. They had a lot of people who were bidding and interested in helping them. And like with our other investments, whether it's Red Sox, Liverpool, Pittsburgh, Roush Fenway, I'm sure we've made every mistake in the book as we start here in the first couple of years. But as we learn the business and get involved, hopefully we'll be able to help improve the tour. We're incredibly excited. We just hired Brian Rolap as our new CEO. He joins later in July, and he's a proven leader in the sports industry, great career at the National Football League. And we think he's going to do great things at the PGA Tour. So long way to go, but that's the history in the background.
Is the intention to get that framework over the finish line and have some sort of commercial agreement? And are we closer to that than we were, in the past couple of years?
Yeah, I would say it's still unknown. I know that's not a very satisfying answer, but it's the truth. We're really focusing on the PGA Tour and the strengths of the PGA Tour in terms of the format, in terms of the markets, in terms of the product and the players and what their needs are. We have built a great relationship with the PIF, and their conversations, I think, will continue. It's just really unclear what the future will hold. I think both parties have a very open mind. And now, as I see it, we're sort of focusing on the PGA Tour, what we have going on, and the Live Tour are focused on their tour and building this global platform. And so we'll see where the conversations go. I think that the temperature has kind of cooled down. It was rough there for a couple of years, but I think things have calmed down and we're both sort of moving forward, focused on our own individual products, and then we'll see where the future leads us.
All right, so let's move to the lightning round. It's 5 questions. It's just, whatever comes to your mind. You ready, Alex? You ready, Sam?
I am.
Here we go. Okay. All right, Sam, what's the best piece of advice you've received on deal-making or business?
Surround yourself with the absolute best people that are a lot smarter than you.
Okay. What's your dream deal-making partner?
Someone who is hardwired towards creating a win-win. Not someone who has to win every point in a negotiation, but someone who really wants a win-win, a fair deal, where both sides walk away from the table feeling like they gave a lot, but they got a lot as well.
All right, this is an interesting one for you. Which team do you want to see win a championship more than any?
Right now, the Boston Red Sox. Are you kidding me? We're sitting here at midsummer at Fenway Park, and we've had a rough couple of years. Alex knows. We got to get back to where we belong.
What's your hype song before a big meeting or negotiation?
Well, thanks to Theo, he turned me on to Pearl Jam about 30 years ago, and so anything Pearl Jam is good with me.
All right. And finally, what's your advice for someone listening who wants a career like yours?
Work harder than anybody else and live by the golden rule. Just treat everyone how you would like to be treated yourself. And no matter where you're from, whatever your background is, the sports industry is a great, great place to be. And I could not recommend it more strongly as a career path.
All right. Sam Kennedy, you are the man. Thank you so much. President and CEO of the Boston Red Sox and a partner and CEO of Fenway Sports Group. Delighted to spend some time with you.
Great to be with you guys. Thanks so much, Jason. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, buddy.
The Deal is hosted by Alex Rodriguez and me, Jason Kelly. This episode was made by Anna Mazarakis, Stacey Wong, and Lizzie Phillip. Amy Keene is our editor, and Will Connolly is our video editor. Our theme music is made by Blake Maples. Our executive producers are Kelly LaFerriere, Ashley Honig, and Brendan Noonan. Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcast. Additional support from Rachel Carnevale and Elena Sosangelis. Thanks so much for listening to The Deal. If you have a minute, subscribe, rate, and review our show. It'll help other listeners find us. I'm Jason Kelly. See you next week.